On today's World Insight, China pulls out all the stops to contain COVID spikes in Shanghai and the capital, Beijing. How are communities coping with a highly transmissible coronavirus variant? How viable are work and classes from home? And the power of space to comfort. A pair of Pritzker Prize-winning architects tells us why we need nature and empty spaces back in our lives.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Many cities in China have imposed stricter measures to curb its latest Omicron flare-up. Beijing, for example, has done several rounds of mass PCR tests at the community level in most districts. The capital city has also put some residential communities in high and medium risk areas under a closed-off management to cope with latest outbreak. While some other cities in China are fighting even tougher battles against its worst COVID-19 surge in 2 years. Meanwhile, China is also experimenting with remote working to weather with the protracted pandemic. So how people are coping with life and work under very different circumstances? I asked them this question. Let's hear our conversation. For the discussion on life with COVID, we are joined in Seattle, Dr. Alice King-Kyang-Tan, internist from Ms. Medi Women's Hospital, and also from Beijing, Liu Baocheng, the Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome to both of you. You're joining us from different parts of the world. Tell me about your current stage of life, trying to cope with COVID. Of course, not infected, but a society that has been challenged. Alice, tell me more about you.
Well, right now, fortunately, I'm vaccinated and boosted. All of my family members are also vaccinated and boosted. In Korea, I will have to say, though, that the Omicron surge, we did our best to prepare for it, I think, but it was very, very difficult. It was very challenging. And even though we had a high population vaccination rate, 65% of the total population had received up to a third dose. More than 90% of seniors aged 60 and older had received up to a third dose. But despite that, we saw a huge number of fatalities, huge for our standards. We went into the Omicron surge with 5,625 deaths as of January 1st, 2022. Today, we have more than 23,000 cumulative COVID deaths. So the number of deaths increased by fourfold during that short period of the Omicron surge. And so despite our massive efforts to try to vaccinate the elderly and the population, to try to get a business continuity plan in place, we really shifted our resources and our strategies to try to accommodate the surge that we knew would be coming. It did take a very heavy toll. And the saddest part, I think, of what happened with Omicron in our country is the large number of pediatric deaths that we saw. So, of course, Omicron took the heaviest toll among the unvaccinated. And our children, of course, are included in that group. On January 1st, 2022, there were only 3 pediatric deaths due to COVID logged through that time. However, today that number stands at 28. So 28 pediatric deaths and adolescent deaths, children between the age of 0 and 19 have passed away. That's a 9-fold increase in pediatric deaths. And of course, there is no number of pediatric deaths due to any disease, but including COVID, that can be considered acceptable. May 5th was Children's Day. And I'm actually very, very sad about the number of deaths that we've seen in Korea due to COVID-19, but especially due to the Omicron surge.
Families lost their lives. It's certainly very, very sad, especially if they are the children. Having said that, though, different parts of the world are battling COVID in different ways, particularly the Omicron variant in China. That we are seeing China still practicing dynamic COVID zero policy. Meanwhile, there are different partial lockdowns in Beijing, for example, the capital city. Some of the subway stations have been blocked, unlocked. So Professor Liu, we are also in a very different stage of fighting against COVID, the Omicron variant.
Yeah, we have to first of all comply and also show the right type of understanding, but in the same time you manage to work. So we conduct online teaching, and I've been teaching a number of international students over business law, and also actually we are also cornered to find a new way to collaborate with more global universities. Like right now we are teaching a course with Switzerland, Germany, and South Africa together. Yeah, without this one that is being cornered, and we are unable to discover new way that students can interact, over the internet. So this is something that we have to find a proactive way to survive and do better.
On the one hand, the resilience of people. Alice, you are also been working from home for really quite some time, and yet you managed to talk to us, to talk to other media, and at the same time do your own professional work. How people like you, those professionals, on the one hand, knowing what's going on, but on the other hand, being upbeat and trying to figure out ways as problems come along the way.
I think one silver lining of the pandemic has been the introduction of telehealth to Korean Medical Society. Previously, telehealth was not really legal in our country, but COVID really pushed for the implementation and the widespread use of telehealth. And I think this was a way that we could stay connected to our patients. I actually practice endocrinology. I see patients with diabetes, and there are technologies now that can be implemented such that I can really connect with my patients online, look at their blood sugars remotely, and help them almost as if it was an in-person visit. And so that's one way that professionally I could keep on helping my patients. And then the other aspect is just really focusing on the information aspect of COVID-19, making sure that the public stays informed, letting them know what's going on, because that's such a huge part of getting the compliance that we need to try to get COVID under some sort of management. And so I found a great source of reward in playing that role as someone who's keeping the public informed. And I think if you try to make yourself useful during the pandemic, even though there's a lot of stress, it helps you keep going. It gives you something to at least look forward to in terms of the work that you're able to do.
I love that, including the conversation we've been having over the, shall I say, 2 years already. Think about it. But one of the things you talk about is trying to do telemedicine now. And you said it is actually almost as good as in person, but that takes great communication skills and also a lot of patience, the skills of using, all of the electronic platforms that we have available right now, including the one that we are talking to now. So how do you acquire these skills and train yourself in a way about these skills? Mainly we are operating on our own in a way. So always keep yourself to be as sharp as you can. That's really something.
Fortunately, I have a medical background of having been trained in the United States. And of course, they have started telemedicine far before Korea implemented it. And so there are resources available to train and coach doctors in how to best use telemedicine. And so making use of those resources, but also having a very good connection with your patients. and letting them know. I think patients really appreciate when a doctor calls them or talks to them online, and really shows concern that I want to stay connected with you despite our distance. It really lets the patients open up, I think, and they are just so much more receptive to the help that the doctor wants to give.
For you, Professor Liu, you mentioned about you're trying to do classes online. Of course, that's a long time practice already, but different students have a different level of skills in doing it. And meanwhile, the communication in person, particularly between teachers and students, extremely crucial. How are you trying to, overcome the challenge of only online at this moment?
Well, as a matter of fact, the quality of teaching definitely is discounted because of the distant type of learning and students, because you cannot read the student eyes, and you cannot really, poke someone who is drowsy. And so therefore, you have to get more prepared before the class so that, you will do the name counts, and also you tell them that in the end, I have all the electronic data to monitor your attendance, and then
this is a very strict teacher we're talking about here, Professor Liu.
Yeah, constantly, after 10 or 20 minutes, you deliberately, call somebody that, okay, what did I say? So,
I'm not sure if I really want to register your class in that regard. Okay, but anyway.
So, and also that, we also have actually the school have helped us to arrange a teaching assistant to follow up with them after the class, and to ensure that they deliver the right type of homework.
I want to follow up about this because, for the students in China, a lot of things may be easier for them to understand your current situation, your limitations, and the limitations of technologies, and also the practices of policies here. But for many students overseas, and also for teaching staff overseas, you talked about earlier, there has been an absence of information to a certain extent of a few years already with China. So as a result of that, there could be misunderstanding and also, wrong criticism in a way. So Professor Liu, how do you, in a way, talk to them and communicate about what is really going on? And also, how are they responding and curious about the latest situation also in China, in Beijing, for example?
Well, that's a very tough question because I've been constantly asked, when do I return to the campus? I said, even do not ask me, do not ask the president of my university. And even now, the Minister of Education cannot give you the right answer because the COVID doesn't really listen to us, and red tape doesn't work with them. And, the teachers and faculties are working very hard. Administrators are also on their nerves, so that, everyone will have to work.
At this point, how do we see our own policies? How should we understand the others' policies? And with different policies, how can we still work together as a globalized world, which we are? So these are unpredictable and unprecedented. Alice, your thoughts?
I think what's important right now is that we ask the question, what's next? Because we all know that COVID-19 is not going away. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is not going away. There's no guarantee that it will evolve into, the common cold, very benign disease. And so as we try to cope, each society tries to cope the best that it can with the resources that are available. I think we do really need to ask, what's next? What's beyond Omicron? Because what's beyond Omicron is not the end of the pandemic. I think that there will be more. And so there has to be a long-term, even unfortunately now, we're more than 2 years into it, but we have to look long-term. So I think we have to figure out how are we going to be able to protect our public, our high-risk groups, we really need to develop a vaccine that's more durable and has a broader protection against all variants. We have to make sure that we have treatments that are available, accessible, affordable, the antiviral treatments, and we have to have a plan B just in case there's resistance to these treatments. So there's a lot that we have to do, I think, right now, not just coping with the situation now, but looking months into the future, because of course, this is something that we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
Maybe on a yearly basis, infinitely, into the future. And so I think that's a very, very important part.
Yeah.
And my concern about what's going on in China is, of course, China has done a phenomenal job in terms of protecting the public against COVID, long COVID as well. But you have to ask, what's next? What's going to happen post-Omicron? Because you need a plan that's sustainable and tolerable as well as effective.
Yeah.
And I think that's a question that a lot of countries need to ask right now.
Professor Liu, your thoughts also.
Yeah, I think any sensible decision involves cost-benefit analysis, but the challenge lies in how we can assign the cost and what is really the composition of the benefits. So China claims that we play a people centrality strategy. So therefore, at all economic cost and at all other type of cost, we want to preserve more people's life. So for which, culturally, we quite much understand and even appreciate, but at the same time, how we can really do it more precisely to optimize the gain and eliminate unnecessary hurdles. So that's something that we need to do. And right now, also the grassroots level implementation of such sort of policy is rather abusive in many of those areas. And of course, and I know that those people who were running on the ground, they are not really happy with it, and they are also experiencing excessive fatigue. But how we can really streamline the behavior activity, the right type of attitude, the accommodative type of understanding, and also that the type of autonomy given for those people who implement on the ground. For example, those who are really desperate to go to ICU, you cannot really keep them waiting for a number of hours and wait until the acid test result.
Okay.
So that's not really something that's very human. So after all, I agree with our doctor that we do need to look ahead and what are the next, and do we have more toolkits to deal with further challenges.
Okay. Professor Liu Baocheng, Dr. Alice Kim Kang Tan, thank you so much for joining us. All the best to you and your family.